Okay. Good morning. In today's forum, we will meet the very talented musicians, Laura Cabiani, Chris Bates, and Dave Schmallenberger. It's a mouthful. Yep. We will learn about their musical journeys, how they came together, their upcoming individual plans and hopes, and of course, we'll get a musical treat. There will be some time at the end of this presentation for your questions. If you are attending this forum online, you can type your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your computer screen during the presentation. That will enable us to read your question to the speaker at the end of this presentation. If you are attending in person, please make a mental note of your question to ask at the end of today's presentation. And then we will pass around the mic because we want everybody in the room and online to hear you. So you will be speaking your question into the, no, you won't. We don't have a mic to pass. Never mind. We're not going to give Laura's mic away today. We will ask you to say your question, then I will repeat it on here so that everybody can hear it. So we'll get started. Go for it.
Well, it's just a real pleasure to have an opportunity to share our process with you and to reflect on how this service has evolved and how it has become such an important part of this wonderful community. And I'm reflecting, initially this morning I was asking Dave and Chris, because, it's all a blur, but they've been here since 2017. Isn't that a stunning fact? Yeah. And I just with a show of hands, how many of you remember the service that was in this chapel? I thought so. Yeah. So, and let me ask you all then, I know I was subbing and coming on occasion, and then was it around 2014 or 15 that I started coming more regularly, or does anyone remember? Or does anyone remember when this first service started?
Probably around.
Well, and let me ask you all then. I know I was subbing and coming on occasion. is we try different grooves. So if we were to make it, for example, into a jazz waltz, suddenly it's more lighthearted and not so ominous potentially. So if I go 1, 2, 3. You get the idea. So raise your hand if you have been known to go to ballroom dancing or something. So this whole, so step together, step together, step. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And of course, you're all willing to spin on a dime too, and it's pretty cool that Pastor Beth and Marie are picking some pretty hip hymns. For this month, our last hymn kind of reminds me of. Yeah, so you all may not know this, but you're all hip and singing in 5/4, just like Dave Brubeck, And so that's kind of cool. And so that just shows the adventuresome spirit of this congregation, that you're willing to explore music and to let the music of this service lift us up and spiritually connect us. And I will say one thing, and then I want to let these folks talk a little bit too, but I love paying attention to the research that's being done. For example, in Sweden, I have a jazz pianist friend, Lars Janssen, who has been collaborating with this hospital in Göteborg. And what they've found is if they put heart monitors on choirs who are in song together, the heart rate of the choir becomes 1 and is mellowed out. So there's a physical, visceral response to singing together that can actually literally heal us. It's not just our spiritual mind thinking, it's physically actually happening. I just love this fact because it's the research is bearing this out, and I just think that's a fascinating fact that we can, those naysayers, can maybe wake up a little bit to the power of music in a spiritual practice. So I'll just put that out there to you. So anyway, should we play a little something else? Yes. So let's go to Amazing Grace, and I only picked that because it's pretty much the most popular hymn maybe of all time. So one of my favorite things to do, and poor Chris has to, pay attention to this, so I love harmony, and so for example, if I take. went into this groove. And so, which was kind of fun today. But then, so what are some things we could do with this chart now that we've already performed it once? One thing we might say is, hey, can we just try it faster than we did earlier? Because it might make it more rambunctious, or boisterous. Yeah. So if I went, rather than kind of mellow, like, which is kind of like chamomile tea, if we went. So that felt, those of you who were, so those of you who were at the service, you might go, whoa, that doesn't even sound remotely like what you just did. And so I guess I would just say that's what I love about this art form. I love improvisation. I used to tell people classical music gives me a backache because I'm so worried about playing wrong notes, and of course Philip Brunel would probably say, oh, don't worry about it, Laura, you'll be fine. Because he's got so many, he has chops, as we say. Philip has some serious organ chops. But I love improvisation. I love trying things out with these guys and letting the spiritual momentum of the service kind of sweep us up. Sometimes the music has a life of its own, and I think when it reaches people, it really brings me a lot of joy. And I feel especially grateful to have these two wonderful gentlemen to collaborate with. And if I say any more, I'll start getting all weepy and teary. So I better. But I do. Maybe we could play a little more. Would you want to hear them solo a little bit more? Would that be fun? So one of the things that we do, and if any of you are curious, I'm really curious here, how many of you, I know Scott, I just found out, so there are some musicians here who make music, on a regular basis. How many of you here are musicians of one kind or another, or have played an instrument in your past? And yeah, fantastic. Wow, that's, sing too. And you can sing, yeah. That's fantastic. So, one of the things that if you're interested in, you could come up afterwards and look at these charts we have. So just so you know, like, it's unlike classical music where everyone has their own part. We're all reading off the same page, and basically everything we're doing is improvised based on this tiny little chart, like a map. And so what we're going to do is loop the map a little bit, and maybe let's just take it out to A. I'll play A and we'll vamp on C for a while. Great. So what I did is I wrote a little vampy, I call it my vampy poo. And it's gonna feel weird because normally we're all used to what we would call symmetrical phrases, but this is a 6-bar phrase, so it kind of loops over on itself, which makes it kind of fun to vamp on. So here's A to the coda. Ready? 2, 3. Well, I guess maybe I could share with you just a few quick other things, and then maybe you could ask some questions. But we could talk all day about the joys of making music and how important it is in our community, and how much we value it, you know. But specifically to Plymouth Church, what I especially appreciate is the wonderful staff and our wonderful pastors who faithfully every week are in touch with me about upcoming service, and say, here are the tunes that we'd like you to arrange, Laura. And I say, oh, goody. So I get to work, and I make charts for the group and for you all to sing along with. And then if there's a choir, for example, of Mary Lehman, or we've had some wonderful guest choir directors lately. I'm spacing out on the names, but she's great, and Siri's great. Anyway, so they say, "Oh, Laura, here's the chart that the choir is singing," and I say, "Oh, we got to get the bass player and the drummer in on this." And so Chris and Dave, they graciously read my long epic charts for the choir pieces, and then every once in a while, Philip says, "Hey, Laura, what about doing some Bach?" You know, and so I arrange Bach sometimes, which that was a stretch, but you understand that it's the collaborative nature of this community that I especially appreciate, and the fantastic staff and the fantastic pastors that make it all possible. So anyway, this gives you a little idea of what we do. So maybe we could talk a little bit and then play at the end, if that sounds good. So any questions of anybody? And thank you, Myra, for helping out. Yeah. Sure. I'm happy to. Oh, no, that's fine. Thank you.
I'm curious about your training, and if you were started as classical trainer or if you've always just done kind of improv and jazz.
So your question has to do with our training. How do we get trained to do this? And maybe one of you all could start.
Well, I think we should all talk about that for just a brief second. The problem with a question like that is that everyone will go on for 20 minutes. The basic story for me is my dad was a band director out in Hopkins, and I grew up in a musical family, and played some piano and then quit, and then started bass. I've been playing the bass since I was 10. And then I got an electric bass when I was 12, and so I was just playing music all through school, just like everyone else, learning how to read and doing all those things. And then I went to UW-Eau Claire, studying music, and then I dropped out of there after a while, and I just went on the road, and I played in a band with my brother, who's a really fantastic drummer, and I just ended up learning more in the trenches, as it were. And I also had a couple of really great teachers. My classical teacher just gave me this amazing foundation. That was like 13 years of lessons with him. And then I had a couple years of lessons with this phenomenal guy named Anthony Cox, who really, like, a bunch of the speed, the dexterity, and the sort of things that I can do that sound really cool or rhythmically awesome are because he gave me some skills to do that. So and that's something that is not lost on younger musicians, but maybe just in general, like, you got to put in the work. You got to do the reps to get the skill that you need, like whatever that is, whether it's computer programming or you don't want a car mechanic who's like, I'm just trying to figure this out, like, no, I need the guy who knows what he's doing, And so just in general, that experience and that dedication, and that's what I would say all three of us definitely have that. I'm going to pass it over to Dave so he can talk about his training, but that's basically the thing, and then that I've gone through, and then so I'm going to date myself, but I've been playing the upright bass for 41 years. So And then I started, my first pro gig was at Valley Fair in when I was 19. So, and I was playing electric bass on that. And so, just all through my whole life, I've just always wanted to play and be in these situations. I do want to say one other thing about Laura, in that her arrangements and her ability to chart things clearly and concisely really helps all of this happen in a way that if I've been in countless gigs where the information that we have to use is a mess, and you are forced to deal with a bunch of other stuff because everyone's interpreting it in a different way in that moment. And she gives us a really, like she said, a really clear map of things to interpret very easily. And then also that allows us, because we're all curious and have done the training, to manipulate it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. My first professional gig was at the Burlington, Iowa Holodome
What?
with a jazz quintet for a whole week.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I have it all, it's all mounted on a thing, like pictures of the group and all this stuff. It's crazy. 1978. I'm really old. So I started on piano and I was not a good student. And then 6th grade, flutophone, didn't dig it. And then went to the high school and they had like a musical show and tell petting zoo or something. And I saw the drum and I was like, oh, that. And I had very supportive parents. I was very lucky. So I used to practice in the basement with my records rather, LPs. And I did that a lot and sort of cut my teeth by myself in the basement. And I loved music so much, and my parents, again, were supportive that they sent me to a camp called Interlochen.
Yay.
And that's where I really got fired up, because everybody around me was so much better than me. I was a big fish in a very small pond. And suddenly it's like, wow, look at not just music, there were dancers and creative writers and visual artists, and I was like, kaboing, what is this? And I want more. So then I went my last 2 years of high school to Interlochen, which was kind of unusual to do that. I went deep, Jazz, I drank the Kool-Aid. I was a jazz studies major for 4 years, undergrad. I was a classical major for my master's degree, and then world music for my doctorate. I do this because it always sounds funny to me to say world music, because as far as I know, we have just one world, and it seems like music is of the world. But what it meant was other, non-Western European male-dominated music. And so I was playing African drums and steel band and like a kid in a candy store. At that point, I was 34 years old. And again, everybody was better than me, which was great. I love to stretch myself. And so I did that. I've taught a bunch too, but I really love to play music, play it the most. And I will say I play lots of different kinds of music. And I love the variety, but always this vehicle is my favorite. I love Bill Evans, the Bill Evans Trio, that kind of vibe, that kind of freedom, but also responsibility is what I truly love to do. So thank you.
And I'll just give you the Reader's Digest version, but I grew up classically trained, but I always tell people my dad had a fantastic jazz LP collection and my mom had a fantastic classical collection. So I grew up basically playing classical piano and jazz trumpet, and then discovered jazz composing, and that was kind of the magic potion for me. Undergrad I majored in composition undergrad, and then went on the road for many years, and then got my master's 10 years later in improvisation from Michigan in Ann Arbor, and then started teaching, and I love teaching. And so I teach at Carleton College, and that's my first love, but I love composing and I love playing with these kind of people. So, yeah, but I feel very fortunate to have a background in classical. I would encourage anybody who wants to go into this kind of music to like Chris was saying, you got to do the work, you got to put in the time. So, but it's very rewarding and worth it. It's really worth it. Yeah.
So we want to be fair and alternate between online and so I'm going to read the next online question, which comes from John Humphrey. And he asks, when do you feel close to God? Composing, question mark, performing, rehearsing, praying, all of the above. One more than the others? Question mark. A lot of questions there.
I actually have a story, real briefly. Before I was here, I was at Hennepin United Methodist Church, and before that, I was at, or at the same time, I was at Gethsemane Episcopal in downtown. And I was, we played there once a month, and Daryl Boudreau and I what we would do is and I've done it here with these guys sometimes, we'll underscore the prayers. And so at Gethsemane Episcopal, they would have these prayers in the bulletin, and people would randomly decide which prayer they wanted to read while we were underscoring the prayers. And there was just one moment where the Holy Spirit, I looked at Daryl, and Daryl said, "Did you feel that?" And I said, "What was that?" And he said, "Laura, that was the Holy Spirit." like, wake up. So it's only happened to me once. And of course, the next Sunday I came back and I tried to replicate it. I tried to do the exact same progression. That did not work. I'm just here to tell you that you can't force that, So I would just say that it's like practice. That's why we call it practicing. It's a spiritual practice. So you just practice every day to be open, and just that's all you can do is just practice. So.
I don't know. It comes and goes. I had a weird out-of-body experience my senior year of high school where I was playing a concert and I watched myself play a whole song from the audience while we were playing. I don't know if that was God or something else. I wasn't on drugs, so I know it wasn't that. There are many pathways to these higher existences, higher ways of thinking, right? And some people get lost in thinking that it's a outside substance, and really it's an internal substance. And I think given my experience with my family being heavily involved in music, like concerts are sacred, whether they're secular music or sacred music. Like the bandstand is a holy place. Like you don't mess around. You don't, keep your focus on making the best music. I'm certainly guilty of being a jock and throwing a lot of things in when I thought it was the right thing to do, and realizing that from a bass playing point of view, the best thing that I can do is to get out of the way and then let things come to me as they come to me. So that's true of anything in life, but this is a tough question for me. I've read literally probably 50 books on spirituality from every corner of the world, like Zen, Alan Watts, big influence on my thinking. But also, I found this weird strain of books where people from Western cultures were being indoctrinated into indigenous cultures. So there's one where this guy became Aboriginal healer in Australia, another one where a guy became a shaman in Africa. And these are all white people becoming black people, basically, at least black spiritual leaders, which is anyway, it was just this thing a journey that I'm on through my whole life. But during my 20s, that was something that I was really exploring. So anyway, I don't know how I actually define my own spirituality, to be honest with you, but I come here every week because it fulfills whatever that is for me. So, and I just come here and I play and I give you guys what I got from my heart, and that's what I do, and that's all I can do.
Just real brief, what Laura was saying about the choirs and the heart, I feel like when things are really happening and you're in the zone, or whatever that means, there's this entrainment that's happening, and always when it happens, my brain is not part of it.
Yes.
Whenever I think, I'm gonna It doesn't work. Never ever works. Get out the crowbar. It worked last time, I'm gonna blah, and doesn't ever work. So I listen and I bide my time and I wait. Because it is a conversation. That's an overused metaphor, but it is true. It's a conversation, and no one wants to be in the room with someone who asks and answers the questions. People who talk a lot. So I talk very little, and I try to lay back, both in terms of the density of the material that I play and certainly the volume. Because if I take over, I can take over right away and dominate every conversation. And who wants to hear that? I certainly don't. And in fact, some of my best moments is when I don't play. Those are good choices, when I'm like, and enough of you. Let's enjoy this. Truly. So that's my little.
Go ahead.
This is related, and the question I've noticed for years, your communication with eye contact and how you are on that wavelength or in that groove or whatever. But I wonder if you talk about that process. And I noticed it between these two guys at the end where something occurred, I think, to you, and you made eye contact, and then you finished it with a flourish of the drum. You know,
I can actually.
Maybe.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Repeat
yeah.
the question, or I
Yeah,
can.
go ahead.
Well, my understanding is something about what role does eye contact play in the collaboration? Kind of.
paying attention to each other.
And paying attention.
From an outsider, it seems so mysterious. And, you know,
How do you communicate with one another? It seems mysterious to the audience, but you do it. So
It's-
how does that work?
I mean, Dave hit it on the head before. It's listening and getting out of the way and not, someone has to be leading it. And so in this case, it's Laura because she's the melodic side of the material at this point. If there was a saxophonist or another person or even a vocalist, we would follow them and we would take the cue from that. And this again goes back to training and reps and experiencing many ways to end a song or many ways to have those cues. And so we just have this library built up over many years of experience. That's why if you're playing with less experienced musicians and if they're open to that, to the fact that there's either a generation gap or just an experience gap, hopefully they're keying into the more experienced people, right? It's why you put the section leader, who's a more experienced person, at the beginning, in first trumpet instead of in fourth trumpet, right? Like you don't want the leader in the back of the section, you want the leader in the front of that section. But to this very point, so the end of Amazing Grace, you have C7 sus to a B flat 7 to an F7, right? But
I forgot to do.
Right. So what happened, and this is what you're getting at. She did not play in the service outside. She played it a very specific way, and I was waiting for these two anticipatory chords to hit to the 4 chord. Okay, and this is nerdy stuff, but she just went through it in a different way. It's fine. There's no judgment. It's just what happened, and. But the point is that I actually looked at Dave because I was like, oh, not the same. So this is just like a side conversation, actually. But you're one of the most observant people we know, and you key in, you love listening to us, and so you're in here. When I watch a band, I'm doing the same thing. Oh, the piano player just vibed the drummer, or the drummer just played over the top of that vocal phrase, and the vocalist is now angry. Like this stuff is subtle, but if you're an experienced musician, you see the experience of the other people that are playing, right, and experiencing that. And when the magic is happening, you are also supporting the magic. Like I feel like when I have a great concert experience. I'm right there and they're flowing and I'm flowing with them. And we all feel that same thing in the service when it's going that way. Let's play this ending and try to do it a different way than what you have planned. And again, so what ended up happening is that we didn't really play this 4 chord to set up the 1, and then Laura landed on the tonic, and I was like, oh, that's not the note. And so then I looked at Dave for a second time, and then we went bang, the end. Let's try that. Just from C to the last ending of Amazing Grace.
To play it the way I wrote it?
Or, yeah, just play it and, yeah.
Okay, so let's play so start, just do the last line once.
Yeah,
okay, so
okay.
Here's what I wrote. Ready? 3 and 4. Oh.
You have 2 chords before the 4 chord.
Oh.
They're not in my part. So see, and I was like waiting for that because I remembered it in the service, and now I'm erased that from my mind to be like ready for the new thing.
So this is an example of where it's better to not even watch the chart and listen to each other. So if I were just to not look at the chart and they were just to follow me, I might go 3 and 4. That's a perfect example of, this is my favorite quote, how do you get God to laugh? You tell her your plans.
Did anybody else want to elaborate on that question, or? Okay, I'm just going to tell you, we only have 4 minutes left, how did this go so fast? There's one more online question from Anonymous, which might already be answered, so I will just mention it. When do you feel in touch with God, rehearsing, composing, performing, improvising, all of the above? One more than the others. I think you kind of answered that already. So maybe we can go with another audience question, and I don't know who to pick. Do you want to? And can you, I'll repeat your question.
What is your writing process of original content, and what do you do when you just how do you get yourself to motivated?
What is your writing process, and how do you get motivated to write and to compose, I think, is what you asked. So we only have 3 more minutes.
The second component was if you're in a rut.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do to push
well,
yourself?
What do you, you're in a rut. Okay.
I've been fortunate to take composition lessons from some pretty cool people. I feel very lucky to have studied briefly with Lyle Mays, who was the pianist with Pat Metheny. And I also had classical composition teachers at Michigan and undergrad. And they all have said the same thing, which is kind of amazing. And that is never throw anything away, because you may not like it one day, and then literally 20 years later, you may think, this is actually not that bad. So never throw anything away. And then you have to be doing it all the time. Because I remember telling Lyle Mays, I remember saying, every single one of your pieces is so incredible. And he said, the public only sees 1% of what I write. Not even 1%, he said. So that was a huge lesson for me, that just because you've written it doesn't mean it's going to see the light of day. So the key is to just be documenting your process all the time. And I just think that's fantastic advice, that it's all about the process. And that's what I tell my students, that don't, and it's also not precious. Like, I could throw all of this away tomorrow and just, and not worry about it. And if it's worth remembering, it'll come back to me. I believe that when I compose a piece, I didn't really compose it. It kind of came through me. And I just think, okay, if this is meant to be, it's going to come at me tomorrow and the next day and go, come on, you got to play me. That's kind of what it feels like. It won't go away. The Germans have that word earworm, a tune gets in my head and I cannot let it go until I finally get to play it with these guys. And then maybe it takes a break and leaves me alone, So I don't know if you guys have that. I know Chris, we just played a gig last night and he wrote this really cool blues that I must say has been in my ear all night. So you might want to speak a little bit to the process of composing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same, but I definitely go in phases where I don't write anything for a long time. I'm not a practicer of composition in the way that Laura is. And that maybe should change if I want to get better at that, but it also goes to my schedule and what I feel I have time to do, because I do play a lot of music for other people, and so I'm constantly learning other music because that's just what I need to do to be able to play the gig better, and that's my job. So when I write, it sometimes, and I've been dejected about this many times for many years, because it is a thing that I like to do, and I feel like I have a voice as a composer. I've even won a grant for it many years ago, and so that's the kind of thing that I feel like I need to get back in my wheelhouse, in my regular practice. Yeah. But that being said, there's no one way to write a song, no one way to do it. And so again, having those fragments, having those little chord progressions, like often when I pick up the bass to practice something else, I will just start playing something and then I document that. I have stuff on my phone, I have stuff on my computer, I have stuff written down. So again, I have a journal of a lot of these things, and I just need to get it back in there and do a little bit more work on each of those things. But that is such an amazing part of the music, is like, you can be a player and be really good at reading and interpreting all sorts of music, or just learning a lot of songs and knowing a ton of songs and being able to play lots of gigs that are not original music, but to bring your personal voice to your own personal music that's a very deep thing. And I think a lot of people don't think about it that way. There's different camps. Like, you have people who are very driven to be their own artist and have their own music. And then there are people who are just trying to make a living making music, and so they play all sorts of different things. And that's the same through basically any art form. Like, think about a graphic designer. Maybe they can make something like this vase photo or whatever that is, collage thing.
That's Brunel, that's Carol
yeah,
Brunel.
that's hers. But she might have a graphic design job, or maybe she did that before. I know Tim, her son, is a graphic designer, but he might be a visual artist too, but he isn't known for that voice, right? That sensibility. But you might see 5 commercials on TV that were all done by his company, and that's his, so it's a different thing. There's different levels of that artistry in practice.
And I would just add to what Chris is saying, that one of the reasons why I love both Chris and Dave so much is that they bring their own versatile voices to this group. And it's the versatility that I really, really appreciate. I'm not sure what that song is.
It's the same thing, it's playing again.
Maybe.
It's the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Anyway, this has been quite a wonderful time together. Thank you so much for having us.
If you ever have any questions of any of us.
Yes. So, we're supposed to officially draw to a close, and I need to tell you about the 2 other programs in the summer, but I don't think there's any reason we have to all leave this room if you guys want to do whatever. So anyway, the second Sunday of the month, all summer long, so there's 2 more, we're having kind of funner programs. Next month, July 10, Why Care About Our History? Mary Welfling, the Plymouth Church archivist, will speak. Then in August 14, this is the second Sunday of the month, and the Think Teens, Think Second Sunday. How did it all begin? Lawrence Rudnick, Professor Emeritus of Astrophysics, somewhere, not sure where, but he's going to talk about the solar system, I guess. So there you go. That's it.